And to go about rendering, I'm going to show you a few settings first within the user preferences that will speed it up a little bit if you do have a dedicated graphics card. Otherwise, you are fully capable of rendering with just the CPU. It just takes a little bit longer. So first I'm going to go into the properties window and click the render tab. So you have your render controls, render, or if it's an animation you would click this, or audio. You have feature sets, supported, experimental. I'm not going to go into those. And then all of your, the size of your image, animation, range, frames per second, and output, and format as well, and a bunch of other stuff. We will be using the sampling tab here. So once you click the render tab, we'll be using this. We need to, I'm going to close this down just a little bit. And then we need to go into the file preference, or the user preferences, I'm sorry, up in the file menu. And you have a bunch of options. So you can, options for the interface, options for editing, input. These are add-ons which can be very useful. There's all kinds of cool, you can grow ivy, add trees. There's all kinds of the landscape module. You can just search through everything or filter through type. Some of these you can create bolts. There's all kinds of neat stuff in here. Feel free to explore and see what they do. This, you can change the color of everything in the Blender interface. I just leave it alone because I just tend to make a mess of it. File systems I've never messed with. System is where you want to be. Down here in your compute device for cycles, right now you can see it's set to CPU. We want to use the CUDA processors, so I have this really janky old graphics card, but it will make it a little bit faster. And from the drop down you can select whichever graphics card shows up in the list there. So I'm going to close this out. And now over here you see that the device is set to CPU, but I'm going to set to GPU so it renders, so you can see it sampling a lot faster when I move it around. It's not chugging along. So for samples, let's go down to the sampling tab. And right now the render is set to 10, so it would look like this. You'd have all these little, what they're called, fireflies. The preview is set to 10 as well. So if you rendered, it would look just like this. We're going to crank up the render just to 100, because depending on your rendering options, whether you're rendering CPU or GPU, that's going to make a difference, and I don't want to make you feel like you have to wait an hour for your rendered scene to be complete. So we'll set it at 100. That's going to give us, I can even set the preview to 100 and it will count up, and you can see it's kind of clearing up these little firefly bits, and it looks a lot cleaner. So I'm gonna leave it 100. It looks good. We could even crank it up to 50,000 if we want to go nuts, but at a certain point there's no need. So like 500 would probably be a bit much for this scene, but it would smooth out all of these little dirty bits here. I'm gonna crank this back down to 10 on the preview. So output, this will determine where your image is saved, but this is more useful for animations. So when you're rendering an animation, it's just gonna put it in there. When you render an image, it gives you the image preview, and you can just hit F3 to save it, which we will do, and then you can save it wherever you like. So you don't have to worry about this output at this point. Just choose, JPEG or PNG. Scroll up. I'm going to just leave this at 50% of HD here. And now we do need a camera in the scene in order to render. And we do have the camera. So let's hit Z again to get in our solid shaded view, and then right click to select your camera. And we haven't seen our scene through the camera yet. So I'm going to show you how to position and control the camera. You can do it like this and then test what it looks like through the camera. But there's an easier way to do this. So let's select the camera. I'm going to go in the camera view, so 0 on the number pad, or you can go down here as well and select your active camera. So this area is going to be what is rendered. So right now, if you rendered, you would see just this top of the tree and then a bunch of blank space. So to control the camera from within the camera view, we can activate the camera controls, which Shift F. Now if you move the mouse around, it's a lot like if you're playing a first-person shooter. You can move the mouse and you use your W, A, S, and D. So A moves left, D moves right, S back, W forward. So you can control your camera like that. You can also add Q, which lowers it, and E, which raises it. So you can just use these keys to kind of position your camera, and you can see it in the bottom left window that it translates down there as well. So I want to just move it. It's going to be in the same general orientation that we had when we were previewing the render. Let me go down a bit. I'm going to go down so we can see the presence. I wonder if we can go down, and then that would look bad because there's nothing underneath. So let's position it. Again, I'm just using the W, A, S, and D, and the Q and the E keys. Let's do a simple position like that. I'm going to actually turn this. Let's just do 2048 and 2048 and leave that at 50%, which I could have just done 1024 and then cranked it up to 100, but we'll just do that. So it's going to be 1024 by 1024, and you can see our dimensions change. So Shift F again, and let's fill up that frame. Okay, now since our previews were looking okay and we have our camera positioned, you can click render, and you can just see it piecing it all together. It's rendering 100 samples per little square that pops up here. And it's a good idea to increase the size of those squares because it will run a little bit faster, but I don't want to go into any of those settings just because it will cause confusion. Because it even confuses me. So, and there you have a fully rendered Christmas tree. It was pretty painless, I hope. Go ahead and experiment with camera positions and rendering it out. And you know what, let me go ahead and show you those sample size that I was talking about. To make it a little faster, I'm going to close the film tab. It's under, it's under performance. And those little squares, I'm going to go ahead and render again. F12 is your shortcut to render. That each of those squares that keeps popping up, that's 64 by 64. So I'm going to hit escape, and then escape again. Now I'm going to crank this up to 256 by 256. Now when I hit F12, might be a little bit faster. There's other settings as well that I can turn off. But you can see by increasing the size of the render patch there, it is a little bit faster. It was a little slow here because the emission material we have on the lights, that takes up a lot of processing So that is always a lot longer because that has to calculate all the light bounces, which I probably have set too high, so that might have been an issue there. You can tweak pretty much every setting for everything in Blender, so don't think what you have is or what you're faced with is all you have. There's so many options. Just look online, Google whatever issue you're having. Somebody has had the same issue and somebody has found a fix for it, and somebody has composed a way of telling others how to get around something or how to do something in Blender. It's a great community. You're never going to be without help or information. So now that we do have this rendered out, to save you would just press F3, or you can go down here to image and save as image, and there's the F3, and then it'll just bring up your file directory and you can save it wherever you like. So I hope this gave you a good overview of how to use Blender, how to navigate the interface, how to create materials, how to move objects, compose objects all together into a little scene, and then render out your creation. This was a very brief overview. There's so much I would love to explain, but just for the sake of keeping things clear and just getting your hands dirty with the interface and 3D modeling in general, I hope I hit my mark, and I hope you learned something, and I hope it encourages you to explore further and dig deeper into Blender and 3D modeling itself. It was a pleasure doing this project with you. Thank you very much for watching.